Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and on Sundays I do a thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. This month I'm looking at books on resilience, and since we have 5 Sundays, I'm starting with a fiction book, and it was weirdly fortuitous, because I Googled fiction books resilience, and it kicked back this week's book, which I already had. It is a very old book. It was initially published in 1919. It is Diverging Roads by Rose Wilder Lane. This is clearly a reprint from Forgotten Books. They go through and they find books where the copyright has expired and will print them out for you. It's like a print-on-demand thing, which is very cool. The accompanying cocktail is a lemon sour, which is 2 ounces of Sochu, a tablespoon of simple syrup, 4 ounces of club soda or soda water, either one, and half of a lemon. So let's do this. I'm not going to quite follow the directions they made online for the cocktail because it didn't make sense. We're doing this my way, cat. Please pick a spot and lay down. You're clawing the crap out of me. Okay, I would like to throw in here that there are actually 2 summaries provided online for this book, because I kind of Googled it to see, and one was from Project Gutenberg. That one is correct. I'll throw a link up or a picture up here. The other one is from Goodreads. It's over here. Not the same book. I genuinely have no idea which book Goodreads was, synopsizing here, because it's not Diverging Roads. FYI, I actually tried to find the one there because I was like, that actually sounds kind of interesting. Couldn't find it, so I'm sure it exists, but it was not a book by Rose Wilder Lane. Rose Wilder Lane is famously one of the 3 mothers of libertarianism, along with Isabel Patterson and Ayn Rand. Where the hell put the lid to this thing? She's also the daughter of Laura Ingalls Wilder, co-wrote the Little House on the Prairie series with her, uncredited, because mostly it was her mother's story. She just went through and edited it and made it child-friendly, if you will. Okay, so Diverging Roads is semi-autobiographical in that Lane became a telegrapher, moved to San Francisco where she eventually married, followed her husband on various sales schemes, becomes a better salesman than her husband, is eventually abandoned by her husband before becoming an author. And all of these themes are in Diverging Roads, not necessarily quite in that order, but it's very close. Like, clearly you can see that she was drawing from her own life experiences in writing this book. I have a tablespoon of simple syrup, because there's not a whole lot of simple syrup left in here. I barely have a tablespoon. It's one of those weird, God, it's good things. I'm sorry about, Susan in Indiana dying of kidney failure, but God gave me just enough simple syrup to make this freaking cocktail. So the protagonist in Diverging Roads is Helen Davies, who grows up in a small town, Masonville, California, on her family's farm. Now, she is well aware that being a farmer is hard, all right? This is not an easy life. Her parents must renew the mortgage annually to keep ahead of the bills, especially in a bad harvest. Sometimes they have to take out a little more than the property's actually worth because that's what they need to do to keep feeding the family. So it's a rough life, and she's well aware of that. The book starts right after she completed high school. She just graduated. She was second in the class. The top valedictory went to Paul, and they're kind of start courting each other. So they're sweethearts. They're dating. This needs to get shaken really quick. It said to stir it, but it didn't make sense to stir it with the simple syrup because syrup is thicker, so I shook it. There's no way in hell I am getting... This is not an 8-ounce cup. There's no way in hell I'm getting 4 ounces of simple syrup in here, or of club soda in here. We're going to try, though. We'll do this, and I'll just top it up as I go. There. So she's dating Paul, all right? And Paul has been offered a job as a telegrapher, however you pronounce it. And they talk about possible marriage, but Paul, being a responsible man in, say, 1906, wants to be established before marrying Helen. This is, incidentally, best practice for back then. Typically, men didn't marry until they were in their mid to late 20s because they needed to be established and able to take care of a wife before they married. So the fact that they're the same age already kind of sets them up for failure in this venture, just because he's not going to go outside of societal norm, which says you make sure you can support a wife before you take a wife. And Helen doesn't necessarily want to wait until he's in that position because she'll be 26, 27, 28 by the time he's ready to marry her. So she doesn't want to be a burden on her family She's now graduated high school. She needs to find something to do with her life. So she's proactive on her own fate. Rather than just sitting back and waiting for things to happen, she decides to go out and see what she can do. And part of what had grasped her mind is when she and Paul were talking, he was telling her about a telegraph location where the husband and wife worked it together, right? He would work the day shift, she would work the night shift when telegraphs weren't as busy, and together they ran that station. And she thought, that sounds like a good idea. Let me learn to be a telegrapher too, and then I can help run this station with you. Or run a station with you, not the same station. Let's try this. That is really tasty. Paul was not as enamored of this idea. He wanted a wife. He wanted the wife who's going to stay home and clean the house and wash his shorts and take care of the babies. She just wasn't necessarily opposed to those ideas, but she didn't want to wait to start that life. And so she thought one way to not have to wait is, if I am working too, we can work together to build a life. So she goes out and she finds a telegrapher course in Sacramento, California. She talks to her parents, simple syrup on my hand, and they borrow an extra $100 against their mortgage to pay for the school and her room and board while she's learning. So she's off to Sacramento, where she learns the absolute bare basics of telegraphy before discovering, just as she's running out of money, that the teacher who owns and operates the school is a drunk, hasn't actually been teaching them much of anything. She hasn't learned as much as she wants to. And just as she's piecing this together and realizing the dire strait she's in, because she's $100 in debt to her parents, which doesn't sound that much, but it's about $3,200 in debt to her parents, according to an inflation calculator, in modern currency. So $100 back then, about $3,200 today. And she needs to pay her parents back for that because they have two other kids at home, her younger brother and sister, that they have to care for as well. So she's now going, okay, how am I going to pay this money back? So just as she's figuring this out, she's piecing this together. A friend of a family friend, Mrs. Campbell, who spoke to the lady who dropped her off in Sacramento, because decent young ladies back then went around with chaperones as long as they could. So a friend of the family rode the train with her to Sacramento before continuing on to her journeys, made sure she was in a boarding house, and then left. Well, this friend ran into Mrs. Campbell and told her where she was staying, and Mrs. Campbell is shocked to discover this because the owner of the boarding house supplements her own income with prostitution. Not illegal in 1906, but highly scandalous for a respectable young lady to be boarding there. So Mrs. Campbell plucks Helen from the boarding house and takes her to her own house. And this sounds like it's a kind thing to do, only Mrs. Campbell did it fully expecting that Helen would contact her parents for a train ticket home, kind of with that very condescending, supercilious, I'm a mother, you must do as I say because you are younger than me and you're not an actual adult because look how badly you've already fucked up your life. You're staying in a bawdy house, you gave money to a drunk, you learned nothing, right? So Mrs. Campbell writes a letter to Helen's parents expecting that she's going to go home. And Helen rejects this option. She instead goes out to the local telegraph office and begs for a job. She's like, let me be a clerk. I don't have to be a telegrapher. I know I don't know as much as I thought I would, but let me be a clerk here. I can run messages. I can coordinate the messenger boys. I can practice telegraphy when the wires are slow, and then maybe earn my way into being a telegraph operator. And she got the job. And she begged for like a week, but the guy gave her the job. It was a paltry sum of $5 a week, which is about $162 per week in 2025 currency, but it's a job. That's what she does. Now, Mrs. Campbell does not approve, but now she feels responsible because she's already interjected herself into this young woman's life, so she accepts Helen's offer of $5 per month for room and board. Eventually, Paul comes to visit, and through a series of events, they end up staying out all night. Now, nothing happens because they're good kids, but Mrs. Campbell gets supremely judgy about this and is determined to kick her out. And Helen's boss at the telegraph office decides that she was only playing the innocent. She must really be a bad girl because she stayed out all night with this Paul guy, and she was a boarder at the bawdy house, so she must actually be a prostitute in disguise or trying to earn her way out, and I'm going to make a play for her. So he makes his pass, and Helen freaks the fuck out. And her reaction to this manages to actually convince him that she was everything she said she was, that she was just this girl from a farm who didn't know what the fuck was going on in the big city. And possibly in guilt for having made the pass and scared her so badly, he gets her a job as a telegrapher at a hotel in San Francisco, and she's off to San Francisco. Just gonna keep topping this up with the club soda. Should have gone for the tall glass, but this is okay. Now in San Francisco, she works her ass off. She's working 2 jobs. Eventually she's getting to the point where she's earning $90 per month, which is nearly $3,000 a month in 2025 currency. Cost of living in San Francisco was not as horrifying back then as it is now, so she was well able to afford that and rapidly repay her parents what she owed them. And she starts saving, she's making friends, she's, buying clothes, and she's starts seeing what the nightlife is like in San Francisco, which is where she encounters lemon sours for this first time, hence this week's cocktail. Now, Paul comes to visit in San Francisco, and they kind of have a falling out over his disapproval of her friends and her hurt that when he was in a station where they actually both could have worked, like literally he found himself in a job with the exact situation where she could have come, married him, worked the night shift, they'd have been together. And that's not what he wanted. He wanted a stay-at-home wife, so he didn't tell her about it, and she ended up in San Francisco working and living the nightlife, which she didn't necessarily want. She wanted to build a life with him. He wanted to be all set so that she never had to work. And she doesn't really want to work anymore, but she's mad that he didn't give her the option to work with him to build a life together. And because he can't just support her outright, he's not going to make that move yet. He's moving too slow. He didn't put a ring on it, basically. She even mentions at one point, engaged couples put a ring on it, which was hilarious. And I get her position, though. She doesn't want to work. She really doesn't. She says many times she hates this. She hates having to work. But it is far better to work with someone, building something together, than to work alone, waiting for a future on somebody else's timeline. And that's where her frustration was. So anyways, they have a falling out, and she ends up marrying a Gilbert H. Kennedy, a.k.a. Bert, who she met with her roommate while they were out on the town. And she's excited by him because he knows how to flirt. Versus Paul, who's just very straightforward, says what he says, means what he says. Gilbert's a challenge to her. He's also ostensibly quite wealthy, so she'll never have to work again because he's already set. Except there's this heavy piece of foreshadowing during this section when she first meets Bert, where she thinks, quote, beneath their gaiety, a ceaseless game was being played, man against woman, and every word and glance was a move in that game, the basis of which was enmity. I mean, tell me that's not a recipe for a toxic relationship, a game of enmity in perpetuity against your spouse. Yikes. Would not want that. Again, far better to be working with somebody than against them. My God. Oh, and also, he's actually not wealthy. His father is wealthy. He is not. And his father ends up cutting him off over his playboy ways and multiple business failures and profligate spending, which doesn't come out until Helen has been married to him for a few years. She tries to be a good wife to him. She seriously does. She's wants to have him buy a house that she can take care of, but he refuses because no idea why. He just wants to live in hotels and have other people take care of it. And, his wife shouldn't have to clean, so he's going to stay in hotels and have the maids come in and clean the hotel. She doesn't want that, but that's what he wants, so that's where they're staying. Red flags everywhere. I mean, not just the whole not buying the house thing, but so early into their marriage on their honeymoon. That's when the really big red flags start appearing, aside from the whole game of enmity, right? Because they had to sneak out of their hotel when their honeymoon ended because he didn't have the money to pay the bills. Nice guy, right? And they kind of lived on this knife's edge of catastrophe until he gets a job offer selling land in mid-California. It's Coalinga. Where is Coalinga, California? Let's look that up. I feel like it's mid-California, but let's find out. It literally Central California, south of Fresno, Mendocino, north of San Luis Obispo, so it is very Central California, all right? So he's got a job. He's going to sell land in Coalinga. And it's going so well down there. He's got a good group of salespeople. He needs his wife by his side. So she packs her suitcase, spends their last $10 buying a train ticket to Coalinga. And for the first week or so, it seems it's exactly what Bert said. He's correct. Everything is going wonderfully. The first night she's there, he hands her a handful of gold dollars totaling $100. So while he's out selling land, she's staying in their hotel room, reading the literature for the land for sale. And then one day he comes back and says, hey, I need that $100 I gave you. I've got a prospect. I got to show him a good time. So she reluctantly hands it over because she's already got this, she's got this bad feeling. She's played this game before. She knows this dance. She knows this is not going to go the way he thinks it is. But she hands it over, goes downstairs. She's sitting in the dining room eating, and the hotel manager advises her that she can't charge meals to the room anymore. It has to be cash at mealtime. So she, pays the paltry sum. It wasn't much. I mean, again, meals were very cheap back then. But she pays it, and then after paying for a meal, she goes to the hotel lobby and is reading a paper and spots a small byline that reads, "Burt Kennedy sought on bad check charge." And she realizes that her husband has in fact abandoned her, with a rather large hotel bill pending. And as last man standing, she's on the hook for that bill or face jail time because, hey, they can't find Burt, but she's there. Man, if you thought the theme was resilience when she realized she'd been swindled by the telegraph school, hold on to your hats. Because while she's only the wife, in early 20th century parlance, she is well aware that a crime has been committed, and since her name is now Kennedy by virtue of marriage, her own name is being dragged through the mud by her runaway husband. And since he's been cut off by her father-in-law, she can't exactly go to him and say, hey, help a lady out, your son's a scumbag. Father-in-law would be like, hey, you married him, it's your fucking problem, you deal with it. So she heads out to the oil fields near and around Coalinga, and starts rustling up prospects for land purchase, and ends up becoming the premier landman in Central California, making sale after sale. And after she makes her first sale, she goes to the realtor who had initially contracted with her husband to make the sales and makes a bargain with him. She says, I'll take over the territory that was Burt's, I'll make the sales, you can keep an X percentage of my commission against the money that Burt owes the company, which includes the cost of a company car he stole, to the total tune of $5,000, or $162,000 in 2025 currency, just to give you a scope of what she's looking at here, of the hole she's in. The business manager / owner, Mr. Clark, is no dummy. He is well aware that he is coming out ahead in this deal because payment from Mrs. Kennedy is better than no payment at all with Mr. Kennedy in prison. So he accepts her offer and she hits the streets. While in he can't keep all the commission because she needs some money to live. She's got to pay back the hotel she's staying in, right? But she does. Damn it if she doesn't, right? She's hitting the street, she's making the sales. While in Coalinga, she reconnects with Paul, who had purchased a house down there, just as friends, because now she's a married woman. This isn't Reddit. There's no hanky-panky. It helps that he is, in fact, supporting his mother, who had initially put him through telegrapher school, so there's this built-in chaperone to maintain Helen's good name, which she very much needs, because if she's thought to be a prostitute, she's not going to get the sales. She needs a good name to maintain her status as saleswoman. So, this being the early 20th century, eventually Mr. Clark determines she needs a man's help making sales, because of course she does, and sends 2 guys down to take over the field, which she's pissed about, and rightly so. She's already proven that she's doing this. She is selling the hell out of that land. And she pushes back against it by giving them a leads list she knows damn well is not interested in purchasing land, and she sends them off on this wild goose chase, chasing purchases she knows are never going to happen, and keeps selling. She just keeps selling on her own. And to their credit, the 2 landmen that were sent down appreciate the joke was on them and start doing their own damn work, although, and this actually really irked me too, and I can only imagine it irked probably Rose, because I'm sure it happened to her, and undoubtedly pissed off Helen that she had to give them a part of her commission too, because they're men, I guess. I don't know. It was the early 20th century, all right? Nowadays, she would have a lawsuit out the yin-yang and end up owning the company, but back then, she just had to grin and eat shit. So, now one of her gifts, in addition to being an outstanding saleswoman and learning a lot from watching how her husband operated in the last several years, is she proves herself very astute at spotting trends. And she realizes the area is drying up. Not the land sales, the land is still for sale, but the people she was selling to were oil men. And the oil wells are drying up, which means they're going to be moving on and no longer need to purchase land. So she spots this trend and meets with the sales guy who bugged her least. There were 2 of them. One of them kind of snuck her and snobby, but the other one was more or less friendly. So she recommends they start their own branch office, and rather than doing door-to-door looking for sales, run advertisements to bring in people who are interested in buying. Basically change the game, all right? Have them come to us. Save us a little bit of time, save us some time out in the hot sun. And he goes for it, so they start their own company in, I think, San Jose. Now, all through this, she's still reconnecting with Paul, and 3 years have passed by the time she's well established in her own company. She's paid off everything that Burt owes. No word from Burt the entire time, and she and Paul start to talk and decide that if she gets a divorce, they will marry. All right, he still loves her. She loves him. He's stable. He's steady. He's old reliable, right? So she sees a lawyer, and Bert shows up, because of course he does. He's heard that his name is clear and that Helen is doing all these great things. He never really wanted her. He wanted the challenge that she provided, which she recognizes now, being older and wiser. He shows up and she says no. He wants her to go with him to Australia because he just wants his wife back. He's matured. He's grown up. He's ready for a wife now. And she wisely turns his dumb ass down and says, I want a divorce. And so she did. She got a divorce. Her lawyer tried to get her to say that he beat her, and she's like, no, I'm not charging abuse, I'm just charging abandonment, and the divorce goes through. Then with the advent of what would become World War I, so 1914, she knows the sales are going to dry up because she knows farmers. She grew up as a farmer's daughter. She is well aware that farmers are loath to purchase more land when market conditions are shaky, like, say, when there's a war going on. So she sells her share of the business to her partner, deciding to retire, essentially. She's going to retire and not work because she and Paul are right there on the cusp. They're about ready to marry, and so she wants to be ready to go when Paul gives the green light. Now, this lasts scarcely 3 months when she decides she is bored. I mean, she actually starts visiting the office and talking with her old partner just to see what's going on, see how things are going. Was she right to get out when she did? And an idea hits her that she could write articles for a magazine. I mean, she's already done a lot of writing copyright for ads, so she approaches a magazine and says, hey, I could write this series of articles, basically that the towns I've been in, they all have their own personality, their own character. I could interview the people from the town. And the editor's like, yeah, no, that's not going to fly. But you know what? If you can write me a mock story, I'll consider it. If it's any good, I'll consider it. And he thinks that's the last he's going to hear of her. Well, she delivers a story, and to his surprise, it's quite good. So he keeps his word. He actually hires her as a correspondent, and she finds herself back in San Francisco and making friends with other women who have also been forced to make their own way in the world. Women who have been divorced or widowed, who have had a child and then been abandoned, so now they have to raise their child. And this becomes her new circle of friends, and they're actually supportive women, not Reddit women. If you've ever been on Reddit, you know what I mean. They don't cut each other down, they lift each other up, basically. And just as this circle of friends is breaking up because one of them wants to go to D.C. and lobby, the politicians, and right there, and one of them gets hired on as a war correspondent in France, her magazine offers Helen an option to go and be a correspondent to the Far East, Japan, China, and Russia. And she, her heart leaps. She's so excited by this prospect. Then she goes, oh, wait, what about Paul? Right? I got Paul. We've been dancing this dance for 8 years at this point. And she doesn't know what to do. She's considering. She wants to go to the Orient, but she wants to meet with Paul and marry Paul. And so she goes to Paul. She meets with him. And, as they're having this weekend together, she realizes that she and Paul have clung to this idea of who they were as children. And she's not that person anymore who just wants to be a wife and care for the home. She's become somewhat jaded. It's hard for her to trust men because of her experiences with Bert, and to an extent with Mr. Clark and her partner, who felt they were entitled to a share of her money, even though they were, just because by virtue of being men, they were entitled to a share of her money. So she was leery of this. She didn't want to be left destitute while married to Paul, because what if things go south with him? What if he doesn't like her as a wife because of who she is now? And well, there's no doubt that Paul would never abandon her. Like, seriously, she never thinks for a second that Paul would ever do that. There could certainly become a lack of love in the marriage, as she's not who he wants her to be. He doesn't appreciate the changes that have made her so loath to be dependent on him for all her financial support. All right, I mean, he's kind of condescendingly supportive of her writing career because, oh, yes, I know you must have something to keep you busy until we actually marry, but after that, you're going to be a wife, right? And there's that earlier foreshadowing again, right? I mean, rather than a partner, it's a game of enmity, with Paul wanting her to be someone she no longer is, and her wanting to be who she has already become because of her life's experiences. So she admittedly takes a coward's way out. She doesn't talk to him while she's there. She, gives him a loving goodbye and then sends him a letter from the dock as she boards a ship for Russia. That was where the book ends. Which I'm like, that's a really shit way to leave things, right? That's the 1914 equivalent of breaking up via text message. Be like, sorry, babe, going to Russia. Peace out. Enjoy your life. that was a shit way to end it. But I get it. I mean, she's looking with hope towards her future and what awaits her overseas. Poor Paul is left crushed again. The first time being when she married Bert, but she didn't know how else to leave him with a clean break. If she's talking to him, there's going to be tears, there's going to be crying, she's probably going to cave, and she knows that because she does love him. But she can't be who she wants to be with him. She's a totally free agent, she's divorced, she's got no ties holding her back in California. The entire book does take place over about 8 years, so she's 26 when she heads west across the Pacific. She's older, wiser, a lot more cautious, appreciative of what Paul had to offer, but aware that it was no longer the life she wanted to lead. This book was surprisingly engaging. It was weirdly relevant to today. I mean, there's still this ongoing culture war between like the trad wife lifestyle and career women who don't necessarily want the husbands and kids and picket fences. And everybody seems to have an opinion over which is best, and nobody will just shut the fuck up and let women be who they want to be one way or the other. And women are like the worst about it. They're the absolute worst at stating their opinions on, oh, you should have a career, you should definitely be established before you have kids. And then a shocking number of women, establish themselves in a career and then find that their window of fertility has shrunk and they're no longer able to get pregnant. And, it's heartbreaking for them. I mean, as shocking as being a career woman may have been back in 1914, I mean, they were looked down on as spinsters and single, and oh my God, right? I mean, the modern day equivalent is the crazy cat lady, right? And I mean, hell, at least Helen reached her decisions organically based on her own life experiences. She didn't just listen to what social media was screaming at her about what's the right way to live. She lived her own life based on her terms, and that took her in a very different direction from where she thought she'd be when she was 18. Hi, vey. I quite enjoyed this book. I mean, it was a little predictable, and maybe that's just my own jadedness and, bleeding through because, I'm 40 versus, her 18, and so I was, watching her flirt with Bert and going, oh no, this is not gonna go well. He's no damn good. He's obviously a shit human being. And at least she didn't get her pregnant, right? I mean, that was one thing that wasn't in the book. Lane herself did have a stillbirth and an operation shortly after that left her unable to have children. So I kind of have a feeling like this book was her way of embracing that single and childless lifestyle that choice and circumstance had thrust upon her. Choice because she did marry the man, right? Circumstance because I don't think she would have chosen to be childless. It's just what happened. Single is what happened because she picked a bad man. That's what happens when you pick the wrong partner. Happens to women every day. Happens to men too. I mean, don't get me wrong. Men also pick bad partners, but this is very much a woman's story from a woman's point of view from a time that is not nearly as different as people would like to think. Helen's determination to pull herself out of whatever situation she found herself in speaks to a resilience and determination that is absolutely lacking in kids these days. And I feel fucking old making that statement. Kids these days. But I am seriously trying to imagine any of my nieces getting off their asses to improve their own lives when life slaps at them. And there have been plenty of slaps so far. And they haven't so far. They just kind of crumble and scream about how unfair life is because apparently they never got the message that life isn't fair. Anybody who says otherwise is selling you something. That's it for this week. If you like what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.